Hi, this is Jeff with Guitar 21. Today we're going to do a 5-minute deep dive into the AmbiVerb Headrush effect. We've got a lot to cover in 5 minutes. Let's get started. Here's what the dry signal sounds like. Alright, the best way to figure out what a particular pedal does is to turn it way up. That way you know what the pedal can do and understand where you might need to adjust your modulation or other settings. But if you can't tell what the overall sound is, you don't know what to look at. So we're going to start with a mix at 100%. On this AmbiVerb reverb pedal, one of the things that does for you is gives you a swell sound. So if you're like me and sometimes you need extra space in your signal chain, you can leave out the auto swell and use the AmbiVerb turned way up if you're already using that for other settings. Let's go now to attack. For me, this was a little bit confusing at first as what the attack meant. We take it up to 100. I want you to hear the difference in the way that swell sound works. It comes in more slowly. Attack has to do with the dry signal, and I don't mean totally unaffected. I mean the signal wherever it pops into the AmbiVerb pedal. You have 100% attack, means you have all of the dry signal. When you have 0 attack, listen how much faster it comes in. In other words, the ambient sound is coming in predominantly and right away and not waiting for anything to happen in the dry guitar attack. I typically, for my settings, like to have it in the 20% range. Next thing to talk about is tone. Tone all the way 100% on this gives it a almost shimmer type effect. Emphasizing those high mid sounds. If you take it down off, you get a much darker kind of a keyboard or pad, what I would call traditional pad sound. Let's also talk about modulation, because this is a key component. With no modulation on at all, obviously it's a very sterile sound. It's a reverb, but no movement in the tone. 100% modulation, it gets to get into the ridiculous area. For my personal taste. For me, anything above 60 tends to be a little much. 60 is about as high as I would normally go. I tend to run it around 50 to 55 in modulation. To me, this setting is best in the 20% up to around 60% range. The next thing we're going to talk about is release. If we take release all the way down to 0 and play with initially or immediately muting the sound, you can hear there's a certain tail off. The sound lets go of the signal that was coming in right away. If you take this to 100%, it's not infinite, but it gets pretty long. It takes much longer before it releases its effect on the tone. Be careful if you have tails on, as I normally do, if you're running that release very high. So now let's look at how I would normally use this. I normally run my mix somewhere around 40%. In this case, running it around 40% gives me a mix of guitar with the pad strongly in the background, so if I'm playing at church or I'm trying to play a chord progression where the guitar sound is kind of leading things, I still get a strong pad. That's very useful if you're live looping. It takes one extra step out. You can get the pad and the guitar chord progression sounds at the same time, rather than needing to lay down a whole entire pad of the progression and then come back and play chords over that. You can do both at once. This has been a deep dive into the AmbiVerb pedal in the Headrush. Thanks for watching. I hope that you'll like and subscribe.